Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvasjayanam, Namo Loe Savvasahunam, Eso Pancha Namukkaro, Savva Pavappanasano, Mangalanam Cha Savvesim, Padamam Havai Mangalam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Jai Sachidanand. Dear friends, thank you very much for your timely joining, and respecting to your joining, it's necessary to start at our particular time. Our today's topic is holistic living within the home as a partner and a parent. So this is universal topic, a topic which is very, very useful to all human beings. And this topic has never been taught at any school, college, or university level, even though it is directly related to our happiness and our living. I welcome today's speaker. It's my privilege to introduce her, Avani Desai ji. She is a lifelong disciple of holistic science. Presently, she stays at Houston, Texas, USA. Professionally, she graduated as a doctorate of pharmacy with a master's in pharmacy administration. She completed a 2-year residency at Veteran Affairs Hospital before practicing as a pharmacy manager. Then she moved into a role as a clinical assistant professor at the University of Houston College of Pharmacy. Currently, she practices as a pharmacy product specialist for Vigilance, a hospital pharmacy software company. Personally, Avaniji plays the role of a daughter, daughter-in-law, wife, and mother. Hence, she is the most suitable for today's topic. Thanks to her for managing time for us. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Jai Sachidanand to everyone that has joined today. Can everybody see my slides okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. So for the purposes of today's talk, I wanted to go ahead and share my background. As you have heard already, you've heard kind of the roles that I play, but one of the biggest things I want to present is sometimes the relative relations within the home really guide and dictate how we view life, right? It provides the experiences and breadth to all of the topics that we're sharing. So one thing I do want to share this is as a disclaimer, I'm presenting the holistic science of Dada Bhagwan and what he's brought out to the world. And I pray to Dada that none of the filters with which I have relative relations will impact any of the words that are spoken. I pray that his truest intent in all forms is conveyed through this talk, so that it can benefit mankind. And then just a prayer for myself. Really, when I was asked to speak on this topic, I chose, to volunteer to do this because I really felt like I needed it for my current journey so far. Playing all these roles that I do, I wanted to hear what Dadaji said about each of these different topics, whether it be a spousal relation topic or whether it be the topic of being a parent. And so this was my way to drive that inner research, read all that he's spoken, and so I consider this opportunity as a self-talk, a talk of my inner self with my relative self. So you all are witnessing here today, me talking to me, and may you all benefit from my own self-teaching. Jai Sachidanand. So for the objectives of today's talk, we're going to start out by talking about marriage. We want to talk about the purpose as defined by holistic science, the intentions from a relative standpoint that we can see. And sometimes those intentions are going to either strain the purpose or they're going to uphold that purpose of marriage. Then we're going to define the roles of a husband and a wife, and we're going to provide a guide to dealing with each by sharing the psychology of how women and men work internally from the holistic perspective. We're also going to talk about attitudes towards the spouse that can lead to different outcomes. Then we'll move into the topic of parenting. So we're graduating from marriage and moving into the family life. We'll discuss the responsibility of a parent, parenting with a holistic approach, and then generational dealings as it relates to the evolving role of a parent. Obviously, as our children evolve in age, we have a different mentality and a different dealing with the parent. And the holistic science has taught how you as a parent really need to evolve in your role. And then last but certainly not least, we're going to discuss various universal aphorisms of Dada that have led to a happy and harmonious home. So let's start out with, what is marriage? Is it a test for liberation? Is it B, is it a give and take transaction? Is it C, is it a sacrifice or the end of freedom? A lot of times people think of singlehood as your time to be free. And, if I'm bound in marriage, that's going to be an end of my freedom. So is that what marriage is? Or is it D, is it a happily ever after? Is it a fantasy or a fairy tale? So obviously, if we take into account relative perspectives, maybe we can argue that A, B, C, and D are correct in their own ways. But from the holistic perspective, really, when you have that need or that want for a higher level or high being outside of this worldly life, marriage can really be seen as that test for liberation. Just like a waterfall that is going over really sharp stones, the waterfall is going to cause that stone to kind of soften up its edges and in order to let that water flow. So in the course of nature, we look at marriage in the same way, is that we're all stones of different sharpnesses and different sizes, and we're trying to really go into the accordance of nature and that free flow of water. And so really it's our way of softening at the edges, and really allowing for that free flow. As a give and take transaction, you can kind of think of that as like a positive and negative charge. A lot of times we're charged in different ways, and in order for us to kind of discharge that positive charge or that negative charge and neutralize, you need that give and take transaction. From a sacrifice perspective or the end of freedom, I'd like to argue that really the perspective should be seen from the holistic approach, which is, it is not necessarily the end of freedom, but maybe the beginning of freedom, because by you understanding, what your mistakes are, being in that marriage, you kind of have the ability to get to a higher level of moksha or freedom, or complete freedom. And then the happily ever after, why not? With the right inner mindset, marriage is the route that can actually help us to achieve that complete liberation. So why do we marry? Oftentimes we believe there to be a happiness in something that we don't have. That's why we seek a life partner, or we seek a family to bring us that merriment. However, sometimes after marriage, if we try to solely live as ourselves without consideration for the needs and happiness of those around us, then marriage can feel like a mar age, or it can feel defective or spoiled. So with the right inner intent and perspective, we can view the sanctity of the unity as a way of becoming straightened and softened and smooth. We talked about the waterfall example, but another thing that Dadaji mentioned in his talking and his dealings was that when you're aspiring for moksha, a lot of times you think that I can read about it and I can reach this higher level by reading. And books can only be, take us so far. There is that need for anubhav or experience in order for you to really turn the lens inside and realize what is it that makes up this relative body? What are the reasons for why this interaction has come in my life? So really that self-introspection happens when we do have a spouse and we do interact with a spouse or someone that knows us from the inside level. The other big thing is that attachment and bonds that are breaking. A lot of times we feel that something is mine when we're married. The spouse is my spouse or the children are my children. And there's a need for that breakage of that bond, because anything that's related to my or sense of attachment in that way is also affirming that there's a false sense of identity. The identity is within this body, mind, and speech form, when in actuality, the holistic science teaches us that our true identity is actually within. So in a way, when we get married, it's this ability to kind of recognize and go back into our true form, and that true form being in that real self will allow for detachment to this world, and it will allow for aversion of those temptations that are calling. The holistic science also teaches that worldly temptations are not something that we should abstain from. And in fact, abstaining from those temptations can actually lead to a stronger craving for them. So we want to make sure that these temptations are lived out, but in a natural way, so that anything that is of the positive or negative charge can be essentially neutralized. And you have that natural aversion or detachment to those worldly temptations, rather than it being something that you're actively trying to be averse to. So in essence, this is where the pharmacist of my relative self comes in. Marriage is like a prescription for repentance. It's that ability to actually acknowledge that we are mistaken, we're full of mistakes. And in order to reach that higher spiritual elevation, it's that ability to self-introspect and realize, where can we be softer? So in this day and age of our Kali time cycle, many times the intent behind marriage is to fulfill that sensual attachment of the body. So holistic scientist describes this purpose as really just a waste product of the self. So anytime that is being kind of the priority, you're going to see a waxing and waning of feelings. Anytime a conflict arises with the spouse, the mind is going to quickly jump to divorce or quickly jump to escape. Also, whenever a sensual attachment is valued, you're going to see a wandering of the eyes in the absence of that spouse. And anytime the container has deformed, or the body has deformed, there's going to be a change in emotion. And so really the intent of marriage is to aspire for that Paramatma love, or that godly love, which is very unconditional. So whenever someone's going through the intent of marriage, or going through that actual procedure, you'll hear a lot of the talk being about that wholehearted dedication, that undivided devotion. And those types of ideals really yield no waxing or waning in the feelings that are involved with that family member. It's also whenever you see that kind of love, it's one that doesn't change, and it's really felt within the core of the heart. And so that's really what we aspire for. And a lot of times, if you remember from, if you're married and you remember from that day that you got married, or if you witnessed a marriage, you'll hear a lot of the mantras that are spoken. It's really to aspire for that permanency of love. So partner selection, this is obviously something that is really, really difficult to distinguish or figure out when you have barely met someone, whether or not they can be suitable for you as a life partner. And a lot of times the priority is on the external beauty, the color, all of those things are valued. The holistic scientist teaches that really you need to reach that heart level. You need to be considering the inner values or the inner beauty of that individual. And one of the biggest things is that a lot of times nature is bringing together two people for a purpose. A lot of times the wife and the husband, they've got different strengths, they've got different weaknesses. And by those two charges coming together, it's the ability for, each of them to discharge in a way that they can reach a higher state together. So in the present times, a lot of times we'll hear that, women are not happy with being evaluated by the man and the man's family. A lot of times we've heard that, okay, the man's family will come and do a series of tests on the woman to deem if she's appropriate for marriage. Well, what our holistic scientist, Avaniji, has explained is a lot of times what you see in society is really a cause and effect relationship. So in the past, there were causes that have led to what we see as the present day evaluation of the woman. The Swayamvar is an example of this. Is a woman was once, she had a line of men and she could choose who she garlands. And during those times, all those men would be so eager to win over this woman, and they would try so hard, and they would feel so dejected when they didn't get that garland. And so those feelings have kind of become that cause for why now those women are feeling dejected. So really kind of thinking about the cause and effect from a worldly perspective is really important. I apologize for the background noise if you hear my children in the back. So what does Dadaji say about the ideal husband or the ideal wife? Really, the ideal husband and what we should aspire for is one who maintains that happy, harmonious family life. And the same goes for the wife, one who cares for that happy and harmonious family life. So husband and wife as innate and learned arts. There are 6 arts, what the holistic scientist teaches that a husband should try to aspire for. These are the 6 arts that a husband should try to uphold for the sake of the family, for the sanctity of that unit. The art of writing, the art of cooking, the art of fighting, the art of swimming, enticing, and stealing. And so a lot of times when we kind of look at this from a relative perspective, we think, why would we want a husband that would be capable of stealing? And I think the 6 arts really come about from a standpoint of any circumstance that comes your way, it may require a different type of dealing. And there's not really a positive and negative associated with each of these arts. It's really just in that time period and in that moment and in that circumstance, how you had to deal with that circumstance in order to help the family, in order to fulfill your dharma or that relational aspect. And so it's really important to understand that those arts are not necessarily meant that, oh, this husband should steal or the husband should fight. It's really in essence that if that time or that place came about, that should be the role, and that role had to be fulfilled. The husband should feel ready to fulfill that role. So in dealing with any man, however senseless or shameless, so this is really important, the art of dealing with people, and this was written in a way that, you think senseless or shameless folks, you can't always deal with one person in the same way. You can't always use positive words for every individual. Sometimes there comes a time where you have to be sharp or you have to be a little bit more firm. And so really having that art of dealing with any type of man is a role that the holistic science preaches that is very important to fulfill that family responsibility. Then keeping cool and composed. This is really important too. It's not that you can quickly jump to anger and deal with any situation. You don't want to be completely a coward either. You have to be bold in order to uphold that relation. Excuse me. The other big thing is really having faith and self-confidence. Dadaji in his teachings really preached that it's important to kind of know that you have a strong sense of self and you are able to carry out these things rather than feeling like, oh, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. Really having that faith and self-confidence kind of takes you to that level to be able to fulfill your role rather than shying away from that responsibility or that role. And so really, in essence, a lot of these arts and a lot of these tactics are to fulfill the role of protector. So that has been kind of a art or learned art that is a general responsibility for the husband. Now for a woman. So a woman can actually be seen as a goddess. If you see kind of throughout history, women are able and capable of making their mark in any field, whether it be politics or whether it be religion. And the holistic scientist, Dadaji, has really acknowledged that. He says that the mother is actually a fountainhead of energy. And there's this latent strength within women to care for the whole world and that well-being. And because of that inner strength and that well-being nature, the woman is capable of freeing herself and others from bondage. And so really acknowledging kind of the roles and arts of both the women and the men, you can kind of see that marriage becomes really essential for a balance of the two. So let's start with the perspective for the husband. So, how do we deal with women? How do we deal with wives? So Dadaji has said that if you feel like you're fighting a lot with your spouse and your wife always seems to get into arguments, you've got to understand and take a step back and realize that there's some degree of ignorance that's causing these differences between you and your spouse. And all of these happen per scientific circumstantial evidence. All of the life's events are happening per this cosmic power that is there to essentially neutralize, whatever deeds that you've brought from your previous lives. And now understanding that cosmic power and understanding that, when I'm being yelled at, it's not necessarily that the yeller is the one at fault. It's actually my own fault, or it's actually my own karmas that have caused this to occur for me to learn the lesson. Having kind of that mindset is really important when you're dealing with a wife. So rather than having that emotional outburst or blaming the woman, it's really important to keep your cool, have an acceptance attitude towards the woman, and maintain your awe and dignity of all that she's capable of. So if you're having clashes, it's actually essentially that you're not understanding how to interact with the wife. And so kind of keeping that in mind allows you to see, okay, what is it that I can do better? Or how can I change my attitude so that the outcome yields what I'm looking for? So one of the key things that Dadaji stressed on is the inbuilt mechanism of a woman. The inbuilt mechanism of a woman is that if she is offended, the woman will never forget that she was offended. And this is really important, not something that you'll see in psychology textbooks or anywhere, but just that understanding that there is this sense of memory and there's this sense of whatever happens will retain for a long time within the woman. Knowing that about the woman will kind of help you realize, okay, if I make a mistake, she will remember, she will bring it back and forward to me. And understanding that as kind of a nature rather than viewing that as a fault or blame is really important for the perspective of a husband. Your worth to a woman is actually going to be reflected from the manner that you regard the wife and how you revere your wife. So really, if your attitude towards what women or your wife is very low and you're disregarding her, her vision of you in her eyes is going to be equally reflected. So really, to be deserving of that love, you have to have that appropriate treatment towards your wife. Your own attitude is really the measure of whether or not she will appreciate you or she will depreciate you in her views. And so really, Dadaji stressed to not correct or reform a wife. You have to accept her as correct and realize that she has come in that form for you to essentially correct yourself. And so one thing that the holistic science teaches is one who never gets angry is going to command greater awe and greater respect in that woman's eyes. So guide to relationship development. This is kind of a cause and effect. So the way in which an attitude is present towards a woman, this is kind of going to be the outcome or you're going to see in the relationship. So Dadaji says that if you habitually find faults, if you habitually, just point out every time this woman is wrong, you're going to see a resentment form within the wife for the rest of the life. Just like you understand now that if there is an inner built mechanism that the wife is going to remember something for the rest of her life, then clearly, if you're constantly finding those faults, she's going to have her own list within that's developing. And she's going to have resentment built towards the husband. Now, maintaining awe and dignity of the wife, that is really kind of what the holistic science preaches, is understanding, all that she's capable of, understanding all the roles that she does play, and really being holding her to that respect and level. That's going to yield the modesty within her. That's going to yield reverence and reciprocation of what you're providing to her. So if you depreciate or degrade, if you have any of those tendencies, what yields from that is really an animal or beastly form. So the holistic science really, discourages any type of physical, mental abuse. Overly pampering and foolishly spoiling the wife is really going to release the spoiled and demanding tendencies in the wife. So there has to be a degree of balance. And so the holistic science teaches love and respect with strictness. And that strictness is when you see, and obviously with a wife and husband relationship, there is going to be a need for checks and balances. And so really upholding that love and respect with a degree of strictness, where there is room to improve, you do help and balance one another. That is really going to yield that mutual understanding and balance. Another big thing is interference into the other's department. So I can speak from experience and say this is really very difficult, right? A lot of times, being in the generation that we're in, we like to do in everything. A woman likes to be a part of all aspects of life. A man likes to be a part of all aspects of life. But sometimes what happens is when we interfere within each other's roles and departments, you're going to see that equal interference within your own department or your own role. So keep that in mind, as that interference needs to be limited. If there's a lack of love or awe, there is going to yield a depression or a craving for attention from external sources within the woman. So that's kind of important to also acknowledge and recognize. Any dominance or over-controlling natures towards women, that kind of yields clashing and a lack of respect, as well as a craving for freedom. And then friendship. Friendship is the basis for a marriage, and really having that friendship role is going to yield loyalty, fulfillment, and a balanced life. And we touched on that physical or mental abuse. Really, the holistic science preaches anytime physical and mental abuse is used, you're going to see a revengeful attitude develop within the wife. And if the kids are watching, then within the kids. So it's really, really important that that relationship is upheld to the highest regards. So now let's turn the corners and let's look at the perspective for the wife. What has holistic science taught to the wives for how we think about the inner workings of the husband? Now, before you ask, is this slide missing a chunk of information? We just saw that on the inner workings of a woman slide, there was quite a bit of information. And here we go with our inner workings of the man just being 3 bullet points. So Dadaji and the holistic science has really taught that men are simple. They are artless, they're broad-minded, and they're large-hearted. And so the simplicity of this is, a lot of times as women, you may ask, what are you thinking? I asked my husband, what are you thinking after we've had a long conversation? And his response is nothing. And I'm sitting here thinking and puzzled. We just had a long conversation, and so many thoughts have crossed my head that how is he not thinking about anything? And I think that goes back to what holistic science really teaches, is that men are a lot more simple. They're not intricate and webbed and thinking about a million things at once. They're really kind of task oriented, and they're thinking about that conversation in that moment. They're not a lot of times dwelling on things the way a woman is. It's not, you're not going to see the same type of tendency of remembering every little detail that a woman did wrong in a man as you are going to see in a woman. So really the premise of what we spoke about from the wife's perspective is, from the wife, you really have to understand that anything that's causing a difference of opinion, again, it's really ignorance, not understanding that men are, more simple. You're not going to always get the same thing that you project for a man. You're not going to get the same in return. So understanding that people are wired differently, and the man is wired differently from the woman is really important. So you don't expect that same thing that you may be delivering. So guide to relationship development here, the attitude towards the man. If there's an interference in the man's business, the holistic science teaches that it's going to develop this annoyance with the wife. The husband wants to be able to have his areas and his control over the areas that he has within the relationship. So really not meddling into those affairs, not interfering with every single decision that that husband is doing is really essential. Then constantly asking why he is late. In the beginning, 1 or 2 times that might be seen okay, the husband responds, but really the husband is going to start getting that level of, he feels like he just has to say something. And so sometimes you're going to breed lies when you have that type of attitude towards a man. So really kind of keeping, that in check, and realizing that you can't always just keep asking that same type of nagging about why he is late. Dictating schedule. If a woman takes charge of the schedule and says, you need to get up at this time, or why hasn't this been done? You need to do this at this time. Oh, guilty as charged sometimes. Really, this outcome yields not listening and a craving for freedom. So it's really important for women and a wife to consider that, is we don't want to dictate exactly what time and exactly what he does, because that never yields, a positive outcome. The holistic science also refers to dominance and over-controlling nature. If that is the nature that is within the woman, and that is that attitude that she has towards her husband, it's going to yield a lot of clashes and that seeking of fulfillment elsewhere. So really important to kind of keep that mellow and keep having that balance between the husband and the wife. And then finally, friendship, just similar to how we discussed in the previous. Friendship is really the basis of that relationship. And so that is going to yield loyalty and fulfillment and a balanced life. So we've talked a little bit about we've talked a little bit about a husband and a wife. Now let's graduate into the role of a father and a mother. So for starters, the holistic scientist Dadaji, he described parenting as parents are uncertified. And, Chandrakant, when he first introduced this talk, it's quite true. We teach our whole lives, we learn academically, but do we really learn what it means to be a parent? Do we really learn what it means to be a husband or a wife? And so the holistic science really acknowledged that, we're all taking upon these roles without certification. We haven't thought about what it means to be these roles, what the cause and effect is of behaving in certain ways. And so really, it's important to consider parenting as a responsibility. And one of the guiding forces behind being a parent is really understanding that pure love conquers all. Just the same that we talked about pure love being your intent for marriage, really that pure love needs to retain on for the children. So parents with strength and pure love, and parents that have understood the art of speaking in a manner that their children would listen, that is really the goal within a certified parent. One of the things that the holistic science teaches is a lot of times when a newborn comes into your life, there's a feeling of elation. Oh, I'm a mother now, I'm a father now, and it's just this over essential gratitude and over essential feeling of that you are this amazing role. Rather than getting caught up in that over emotional happiness, really understanding that parenting is actually a preordained obligation. And what that means is you came into this role as a parent because there are some seeds that are sown that now are being discharged. So really not kind of boasting about you raising a kid or boasting that you raised your kid. That those types of attitudes are going to yield expectations within the kid. If something goes wrong, you're going to immediately be upset. If the kid doesn't behave a certain way, you're going to be upset. Or if the kid doesn't take care of you, you're going to expect that, hey, I've taken care of you my whole life. Why are you not upholding the same standard? And that's completely contrary to what holistic science preaches. Holistic science says, do not expect in return. This is when you're in the circumstance of becoming a parent, you're in that moral obligation. There's some seeds that have been sown and that are being discharged. And this responsibility you should hold even greater than the president of the United States or the prime minister of India, because you have the ability and impact on that one person far greater than any role of a leader. And so really understanding that and really trying to introspect and realize what cause is going to yield what effect on that child is very important. So can we just not scold, or is there a responsibility for the parents? The holistic science teaches that the responsibility is on that parent to model behavior, to teach, and to even scold when they have to. It's encouraging constantly the good within the child, especially when the child is so young that they don't have a sense of good versus evil, is really encouraging and nurturing that good and those positive tendencies and discouraging the evil within. And then when to speak and when not to. So this is going to come about when we talk about the age and the evolution of the child. So there will be a time where if you don't have that righteous and balanced speech, that it may be best to actually remain silent. And this is a lot of times when the child is developed enough to where they can think for themselves and they can behave for themselves. At that time, it may be more important to view that child, even though you may recall all those young days. At that time, it's important to evolve into the role of a friendship with the child. So age appropriate with always a loving intent at heart is very important. And then whenever there's criticism, obviously there's always going to be criticizing when you are in the role of a parent, because you hold that responsibility and you have that such dear desire to make that individual or that child be the best version or be the best individual. And so that criticism is often a sign that your ego is getting involved. And when that is the case, really having pratikraman, or what's called a forgiveness cycle to resolve that conflict, is really important. And we'll talk about how that can be from an inner level as well as from an external level. So parenting holistically, one of the biggest things we start with is anger and abuse is a big no-no. So efforts should always be to improve without exciting any hurt or embitterment or reaction. So really lovingly saying things. Lovingly doesn't always mean that your tone has to be completely positive, but there needs to be that underlying, you should feel in your heart that love while you are maybe scolding, and that what's essential is that child should even feel that love. So I had a boss once, and she got this compliment from someone that she fired, and that individual told her, so obviously firing means releasing from the job, and that comes with a lot of hurt for an employee to be fired. However, that employee actually told the boss that this is the best decision that was made. Thank you for firing me, because I learned that this job really was not for me because of your talk with me. And so really having kind of that attitude that the opposing party, or at least in this case, the child, is going to still feel the love when you are scolding the child is really, really essential. Then one time, somebody asked the holistic scientist, can I just be passively silent? I'll let the wife deal with the child, and I'll just not meddle with them and just let them handle it. And really, Dadaji discouraged this. He said, as a parent, both parents, you are really duty bound to correct the mistakes of those young children. So really having inner subtle efforts, let's say whatever you're doing is not working for the child and they're resisting your words, especially after a certain age, you see that commonly, then even having that inner subtle efforts within, praying inside to that pure soul within your child and saying, here's the reason for why I'm trying to explain this to you. I apologize if I have offended your external being. Really having those genuine internal efforts are going to be very important for the long run. Then also allowing that child after a certain age to really take their own journey. So sometimes anything and everything that parent is going to do is not always going to be listened by the child. They may have their own journey and their own mistakes that they need to make in order to learn. Just like we talk about, you can't always learn from the books. You can't always learn from your parents. And so sometimes it's going to be their own experiences that are going to be the teacher for them. And so allowing that, being able to step back and allowing that journey to continue for your child is important, rather than overbearing and over control over what the child does. But at the same time, really having that open door to return home. So once, they've made whatever mistakes they've made, really still upholding that pure love within you so that they feel comfortable enough to come back to confess, if it is a confession, to ask for your guidance if they seek it. That's really the duty that you uphold as a parent. One of the biggest things, again, is going to be normality. Normality is the essence of life. That's an aphorism that the holistic science teaches, and that really applies to parenting as well, is really having this normal and this balanced approach. So love in one eye and strictness in the other. And strictness, again, is not anger. Strictness is really just understanding where there is a duty to speak, where the child needs to be told because maybe they can't learn on their own, and to uphold that responsibility as a parent when you know what's right and wrong, to be able to share that, but with still in a loving way. And then how you say something matters. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? The intention is going to speak louder than even the word is. So the child should always feel your love, even in your scolding. And then, of course, life is a drama, and we'll talk about that kind of a little bit later. But in this drama, you've got to fulfill that role. And so really being dramatic in your nature. So even when you're scolding, if you're in an angry tone, really stepping back with that intention inside of a positive, love, genuine nature is going to go a long way. They're not going to feel that inner pure soul of the child is not going to feel that anger. when it's done in that right tone. So parenting holistically, children are mirrors of their parents. So your mistakes, your misdeeds, your being too lax, if you're lax about anything that they should be doing, any drawbacks or defects, those are going to be mirrored in the child. So what holistic science teaches is, by age level, your parenting should also evolve. So up to the age of about 5, kids have to be regulated. They have this inner tendency for good and evil, and you have to be able to be the one to share when they're doing something correctly or share when they're not doing something correctly. The holistic science also teaches that Surya Puja after morning bath is really a great thing to foster within the child. And so the prayer would be, may you bless me to Surya Dev and the world with righteous intellect of the radiant real being, so the pure soul. May you liberate the world. So having a prayer like that in the morning for young children is very important for them to kind of be positive in their approach and have that, start of the day be so well received and so positive in that light. Then from age 6 to 15, this is the age where children are really developing their sense of self-respect and their self-assertion. And so you don't want to speak against them. You don't want to cause things for their ego to feel hurt. And so this is really difficult because a lot of times you do have to say something harsh to them. But again, having the right intent inside is going to be important. However, also in that age of 6 to 15, you still have that ability to train and guide them. So really, this is the age of developing their character. So it's very, very essential that you're still considering those factors within your parenting. It's not just a let go because their egos have developed, but it is really still guidance during that age. And then age 16 and beyond, a lot of times we think about this as puberty and beyond. That is the age where you don't want to have very, very strong do this and don't do this. And that's because a lot of the defiance is going to develop during that age. Holistic scientist says, when you start seeing some upper lip hair develop in the boys, then or emotional outbursts, I would say, in the girls, a lot of times that that they're developing to that age where they're not going to be receptive to yelling or constantly fault finding. So that's the age where really it's essential to for the child to feel like their parent is a friend. All right, generational differences. So even beyond kind of that young childhood, we continue on. In our culture, a lot of times we have our parents living with us. We have the parents. You may want to live with your children one day. You're still a parent sometimes, right? And in that time, the holistic science teaches that you really got to evolve your role during that time. That is a time where a new family unit has formed, and really understanding the role that you play is very, very essential, and allowing that family to function in their proper manner. So fostering friendly relationships with the growing generation is essential. So a lot of times we have opinions that have developed throughout our life, throughout our experiences, and they can be correct opinions, correct from a relative perspective. But at the same time, your what you view as correct may not transcend time. So what was once correct in the past may be things that the current generation views as completely inappropriate or incorrect. And so really understanding that, with time, differences of opinions evolve, and to adjust yourself with time, that's really has been a common principle within holistic science. You don't want to intrude or meddle or intensify any quarrel. You want to be motivated to only speak through that whenever you're asked to, or your opinion is sought. So really speak less and only when asked. that's really essential when you kind of take on that role of a parent, and they have their own families. Unsolicited advice is really an expression of ego. And so really you want to abstain from unsolicited advice. And then scolding, that's also a disease of the ego. When you're not in that responsibility anymore to scold, and that responsibility is really once that child is of age and they're kind of in a state where they're have their own family, their own lives. At that moment, it's not necessarily wise to constantly scold them the way you may have once in their past. And so really understanding that, hey, this is my own ego that's causing me to behave in this way towards my child is very essential. So pratikaman, for any ill thoughts towards children, this is going to really breed a more positive relationship. We all think positively, we want to behave in certain ways, but sometimes things just happen, things are just said. And so really having that process of stepping back and being able to acknowledge where we've maybe gone wrong or gone off path is really important. And that's going to maintain that positive relationship between the parent and the child, even when things do come up and conflicts do come up. It's also better to cherish good wishes than to improve others at that age. Really just having that positive heart intent and praying for them internally is going to be very essential. And then parental relation is only by the theory of relativity. So this is really important. So a lot of times, essentially all of these relationships are going to be because you have this feeling of myness. You have this feeling of this is, my parent, or this is my child, or this is, that sense of my is really going to cause you to behave in certain ways beyond what's probably best for that circumstance or what's best for the individual. And so really understanding that all of these relationships are really in this lifetime, they don't transcend time. They are essentially just what has come about from seeds that have been sown, and people play a different role in this life is essential to understand in order for you to kind of take a step back and be free and allow that freedom for the other individual. All right, so let's move into some universal aphorisms that holistic science teaches. And these universal aphorisms are essential, especially for our topic of marriage and family life. So first and foremost, the sufferer is at fault. So a lot of times we have lots of complaints. We have complaints against our parents if we're children. We have complaints against our spouse if we are married. One of the biggest teachings that holistic science teaches is the complaints are really they're not valid. They're only valid from a relative perspective. So that lens that you're wearing is the cause for why you believe a certain thing or why you complain in a certain way. And to understand that the culprit is the complainant due to your past deeds, that's really essential to kind of move forward from whatever you're dealing with. So not having that knowledge of what you did in the past that's yielding what happened currently, that really is essentially why we all complain. We all complain because we don't know what that seed was that caused this result. But if you could see that, maybe you wouldn't complain, right? And so essentially it's very important to understand that if I am suffering for some odd reason, some degree, there is a fault within me. There is some mistake that I've done in the past, or there are some underlying opinions that I have that are here to be neutralized. So rather than complaining, can I take a step back and try to understand what is that mistake within? What are those opinions I'm harboring? And how can we rectify that so that this circumstance doesn't repeat itself? Understanding that there's a balance of negative emotions with positive emotions, that's really important to understand. We're essentially going for a neutralization. And so it becomes important to kind of self-observe and view one's own faults. And one of the essential principles is sambhave nikav. So the holistic scientist teaches this, that it's really important that you resolve all of these issues that you're having amicably with equanimity. So really doing so that the other doesn't feel hurt is very important, and doing so to fulfill your dharma or fulfill your responsibility. So one of the most beautiful lines that the holistic scientist A.M. Patel, Dadaji, has explained is, home is a garden. So in the past, in the different time cycles of Satyug, Dwapar, Treta Yuga, home was actually seen as a field of one uniform flowers. So we were a family and we were all sunflowers, or we were a family and we were all tulips. Well, in the time of the Kali Yuga, really, you're actually seeing a garden of a variety of flowers within that one home. So you may have a sunflower, you may have a rose, you may have a tulip, you may have all types of different flowers that are within one home. So how do you deal with this garden? So one thing is important is we tend to expect the other flower to be the same as us. And that is also what yields complaints. But what we need to understand is all of these flowers have come with a purpose, and we need to learn the art of admiring and appreciating each flower for the way it is. We cannot compare one flower to another. This is really important also from a standpoint of your children. You can't you can't compare one to another. They all have their own innate tendencies, their own innate natures, and they've all been woven and seeded differently. And so really, to understand your role as a gardener rather than as a farmer, you're not trying to wipe out this garden and make all sunflowers. You're really trying to allow this garden, in whatever form it is in, to take its own shape and to nurture harmony within that garden. So one of the biggest things is a lot of times, as with our ego, we feel like we're trying to correct others, especially from that relationship of parent to child. Sometimes even within the spousal relationship, we're trying to improve one another or correct one another. So Dadaji, the holistic scientist, he has said that only he who is enlightened and reaches that state of harmony within the mind, the speech, and the body, only that level is capable of improving another. And so kind of taking a step back and realizing, am I really able to change another person? And if I'm not, then what can I do to take a step back, and instead of trying to impact or hurt or change, how can I actually appreciate, love, accept, and innerly wish for harmony within the entire garden? So another thing we commonly hear, and the holistic scientist has commonly been asked about, is vyavhar, societal or worldly conduct. Should we behave in a certain way? Shouldn't we, if somebody has given me this much money, I have to return this much money back to them. If somebody came to my house, I have to go back to their house. If all of those vyavhar or worldly conduct is seen in certain ways. So in the societal definition, we're going to see it's kind of a relative way. So a lot of times, if you speak truth, you think that, okay, if I speak truth, then definitely, that's the right thing to do. But it's not always what is spoken. It's not always that you spoke truth. It's really that intent behind what you said. So was it genuine when you spoke it, or was it fake? And so a lot of times we get caught up in what the societal definition of vyavhar is. And so the holistic scientist has defined vyavhar very differently from what societal definitions and perceptions are. So the holistic scientist has said, in essence, vyavhar or worldly conduct should really be looked at the balance of give and take. And this is really important because a lot of times worldly conduct and societal definitions is what we can see from our naked eye. This person behaved in this manner to this person, so this person is wrong. But it's not always black and white. A lot of times what we don't see is, the previous karmas that have caused this to essentially happen, or this discharge to happen. And we also don't see the inner behavior of those two opposing parties. Perhaps when the person that's yelling is speaking, perhaps internally they have a very different intent than really what's coming out of their mouth. And so really understanding that everything is a give or take balance. You understand that Vyavhar is not really what most people define worldly conduct to be. Really understanding that the right understanding is, whatever past states have happened, those are what's discharging right now. And you cannot judge. The big takeaway from this is you cannot judge Vyavhar. You cannot judge worldly conduct, because whenever you're judging it within your own eyes, your own perceptions, your own opinions, and those perceptions and opinions are limited. They're not the full-on picture of what has happened. And so really kind of understanding that the one that is enlightened, the one that can see all these lifetimes, that person would be able to, really define something, but maybe not us in this present day situation right now, where we may not have, the full view of what has happened and transpired to be able to judge something. To take one step further, tearing apart from these societal perceptions, I wanted to bring in social media, because the way that, the holistic scientist has described societal perceptions, I think it really applies to social media at this time. So a lot of times on social media and our generation, we're breeding this character of perfection and idealism, and we want to show our best behavior. We want to show the grandness of, what we have done, or what our thoughts are. And this craving is really a societal prestige. However, one thing that happens when we get over obsessed with that societal view is it fosters this false sense of self. So you continuously kind of strengthen this obsession with your relative self and all that comes with it. And so that ego is just becoming more and more stronger. And so once you kind of take a step back and you decide that, I want to release this ego, I don't want to continue this ego, then you really realize that releasing really is of simplicity and a naturalness and an openness of living. And that simplicity and naturalness and openness is not necessarily something that, all people on social media want to see. Social media typically is to foster all the best versions and all of that. And so a lot of times you'll see that, you want to kind of self-introspect and realize, am I, whatever I'm posting or whatever I'm liking, am I really considering the naturalness of life? Am I considering the simplicity that comes with, everyday living? And am I valuing that? Or am I living in this false kind of pretentious life? So really, the takeaway of this is not getting caught in that web of external image or the game of external likes. We're not, for one that's on that journey towards moksha and journey towards liberation, we're not here necessarily to be liked by everyone and to be praised by everyone. We're here to fulfill our role and our dharma. And so really being straightforward, being open and truthful, that's going to be essential to really take a closer look at our own internal intentions behind every action is going to be important. And the holistic scientist said, take off the false glitter. The world is actually hollow. We think that we're aspiring for certain things. We want a certain way of life, but what we realize at the end of the day, once we achieve some of those things is, life is not about that external image. All of those things are very temporary in nature and transient in nature. And so really prestige is actually defined very differently from holistic science perspective. Prestige is actually morality, it's honesty, it's mercy, sensitivity, it's humanity, and it's obliging to nature all around you. So status doesn't show through your external looks or, the likes on Facebook or any of those things. Really, status shows through all of these important values that you're fostering within. And so that's kind of the premise of societal perceptions. So the next really important topic that the holistic science preaches is that home really should be viewed as a temple of God. So if you think about God from a perspective, then anything that's more pure nature of a very neutral ground is not going to reside within a quarrel and conflict area. And so really understanding where quarrels come from, there's a lot of apprehension or doubts, and those vibrations are caused and driven by ego. And so when you have those doubts or vibrations, understanding that this is separate, this thought or this vibration is separate from who my true nature, inner self is, really being able to detach yourself is going to free yourself from those doubts, because you're going to remain as an observer of those doubts. And those doubts and those apprehensions are going to be, the basis for why a conflict occurs. One of the other things that the holistic scientist teaches is wealth. So wealth within the family really needs to be through appropriate and fair means. Whenever wealth is acquired through unfair or dishonest means, that is going to contribute more towards quarrels within your home. So really aspiring to earn only that, which is of a positive earning is very important, rather than, cheating someone in a business or, extracting money from other people. That's going to be a very important thing. So right religion, dharma, is that which helps us move towards anything without clashes. So it's not necessarily that Hinduism or Jainism or Christianity or Islam, those are just kind of external facets. But the right religion in any way or definition is really just one that helps you live clash-free. So that's how the scientist views what is right for each individual. So should we be converting? Should we be out there to, change someone's view? Well, from a holistic perspective, the answer would be no, because really that which is helping another be clash-free is actually the right for that level of development for that individual person. So no one independently can inflict any injury. So this kind of goes back to that view of karma and of seeds being sown and discharged. The maturity of those past deeds are really signaling natural laws to combine together these instruments and create injury or to spoil something or to incur loss. All of this is a combination of different charges that have gone together to happen. So when we try to blame one individual, or when we try to blame ourselves, it's really important to take a step back and realize that there's a cosmic power that's beyond anything that we're able to control, and really kind of keep that ego in check when the ego is trying to claim, responsibility or blame another for something to happen. Prakriti is a complex bundle of cosmic elements that have come together from multiple lives. And you can't observe this in just one day, especially not what the holistic scientist says is the Indian Prakriti. Prakriti, I guess the best definition from an English perspective, I would say is personality that's wound through opinions and different elements. And so that Prakriti is really just very different in India versus a non-Indian Prakriti. So the way the holistic scientist has shown this is, he says, in other countries, the way when you see a husband interact with a wife in one day, you know for the rest of your life kind of how that character is. But in India, if you see that husband interact with that wife in one day, it doesn't necessarily reflect every day, and it doesn't necessarily reflect every circumstance that he's going to behave in that way. And so that's really important for us to understand about ourselves, right? If you are of the Indian background, it's okay, what is it about this character or this prakriti? And it's clearly more complex than what I can perceive in one day standpoint. So how does the difference of having a spouse, the difference of having kids, difference of having all these pressuring circumstances come together, how does that unveil this actual true prakriti that comes out in these different circumstances? Really, that observation is keen to kind of create that temple of God. So life is an unfolding drama. We talked about this, referred to at least slightly earlier, but really understanding that all of these relations are temporary, transient, and superfluous. So you want to remain externally engaged. Just because it's a drama doesn't mean you want to completely take yourself out of it. You have to still live that life as an actor on the stage of your life. You have to observe that drama being unfolded and play out that different role that is designed for you. However, internally, in order to be truly free and aspire for liberation, you want to be internally disengaged. And by internal disengagement, what that means is whenever this drama is unfolding, there's going to be a lot of things that are happening within you internally. You're going to form opinions whether this is correct or incorrect, whether this is good or this is bad. And you want to basically disengage from those, because those are the charges that can carry forward with you and reproduce these same results or reproduce different results in order to, again, neutralize yourself. So not becoming one with any emotions that are occurring inside is very important, and realizing that these circumstances are really just discharging for us to understand what's internally our fault. Another big thing with this is the takeaway of being genuine in your role. You should be very believable. You need to play this role in order to make sure that those around you are feeling your presence. They feel that you're an active, engaged member. But internally, this is only applying to your inner self, the disengagement feature. And so kind of keeping that in mind is important from a holistic perspective. So the next thing is paths guided in two different directions. So if you have a copy of the handouts, you'll see that I have this written as change the world versus adjust to the world. And I changed this, refined this slightly to accept the world just to make it flow a little bit better. But a couple things for you to consider is internally, whenever the ego sprouts, we're trying to change the world. So that definition of the world is really external, and it's what we can see sometimes with the naked eye. So we're improving others, we're focused on criticism, and we're focused on actions to change our circumstances. We want people to fit into the relative sense of right and wrong, rather than really taking a step back. And then that change the world perspective also has that false sense of control. Underlying ego feels like, hey, I can do this. I'm capable of changing this. I am capable of improving this person. And so a lot of times the focus is external and not internal. And so what does this yield? This yields a lot of clashes. It yields a lot of inner turmoil. It strengthens, one's own opinions, one's own weaknesses, and it really kind of thwarts your ability to inspire others. And so if you really want to change the world, you really want to take a step back and accept. You want to be that change. And that's the guide of the Paramatma, the Gnani, the God, the nature. And so that definition now goes from an external view of the world to an internal or a within view. So this requires extensive introspection. Your inner resolve should be there that I want to neutralize any of my positive and negative charges. I want to learn. I want to know what these mistakes are, and I want to observe them and make a resolve to not commit those mistakes again. When you have that acceptance view of the world, now you're going to view that there are things beyond your control, that there's really this USADate, or this cosmic power that's really the guiding force. And now the focus is not others, but the focus is oneself. And so what does this yield? This results in that inner strength to allow you to adjust to all circumstances. The more you adjust, the stronger you actually become, because you become more and more like that neutral, that unconditional love of the godly or Paramatma state. The weaknesses that you have within you soon begin to vanish because you've started to not listen to that ego, and you become instrumental truly in inspiring others just by behaving in that way. So the key premise is charity begins at home. And this is a very, very important aphorism, because essentially when we think of home, we think of, our family and our loved ones. But in this aphorism, really home refers to that home within. So only through observing that oneself and that home within, creating that harmony within your mind and your speech and your body, now you can truly be that instrument to impact the world. So really working on yourself is really what's going to be able to have the most impact on others, rather than, utilizing your ego to impact others. So conflict resolution. Harmony calls for dissolution of all differences. So really, especially holistic scientists preaches that you want to especially focus on those home relations, because those are the strongest. Those are going to be the ones that have the most to say about your mistakes, or the most to conflict with you. And so really just understanding that drama aspect, that relative aspect, and when mistakes are conducted, having a way to step back, resolve to correct those mistakes are important. So holistic science teaches alochna pratikraman pratyakyan, which is the correct process of declaring your mistake, apologizing for it, and then having an inner resolution to not repeat that mistake again. So by going through these steps, you're actually clearing that conscience of any hatred for the offender. So this again is an internal self thing. It's needed for you anytime that you've conducted atikraman, or anything that allows you to stray from normality. And it's especially important with your near dear ones. And holistic science even says that even one day that's devoted to this is going to be able to fade 6 months of ill feelings. So really, really important, especially when you have a lifelong conflict with someone, or a very long-term kind of battle within different personality types. This is a very, very important thing. So really pratikaman, it's kind of an inner message. And so the pure self of you is really, you're looking at the pure self of the offender, or the one that has caused hurt to you, or you've caused hurt to them. You're confessing the mistake to that inner self of that individual, apologizing and having a repentance process. So we have this prayer: in the presence of supreme pure self Paramatma, I bow to the pure self of, and this would be where you would name the individual, free of his or her mind, speech, or body, name, belongings, and bhav karma, dravya karma, no karma. I confess my mistake, and this would be where you say your mistake, and sincerely apologize for it. I resolve not to repeat again. O pure self, give me such inner strength to act in accordance with this firm resolution. So how does this relate to your spouse? So marriage breeds rounds of my and mine. So really kind of having that inner dialogue that, hey, not mine, never mine, humming that in your heart will kind of unwind those false feelings of attachment, false feelings of, control, that's really kind of misguided by your own ego. It's that sense of, oh, I am this mind, speech, body, that's causing you to feel like all of these attachments are mine. So releasing those attachments becomes really important. Opinions and prejudices form from years of marital disputes. And so really learning that acceptance and adjustment is the most important rather than correcting one another and clashing because of it. So that inner resolve to resolve clashes amicably, that's going to be a very important aphorism. So in marriage, nothing is yours or mine. It's just ours. Holistic science also preaches that you never want to entertain a feeling of contempt towards anyone or disdain for anyone. Really, you want to keep positive feelings towards all individuals, because essentially you're trying to acknowledge that these individuals are instrumental for you to be free of your own karmas. Amicably, this is really defined through each individual lens as per the good of others, per their development. So whatever is considered amicable to one person, it may slightly differ for another individual, but you've got to leave that decision to resolve no matter what, when the time is right. So it's not always going to be, once you decide that, the next day or the day after that, everything is cleared. Every time you kind of think of this person again, or think of this circumstance again, that that is a calling for that pratikraman, or that resolve to change and correct your mistake. So don't let the mind wander in success or failure or the timing of the settlement. You just kind of continue on your own journey of pratikraman, and one day you will see that result. And I can definitely say that from my own personal experience, I've encountered this where there was a conflict I had in my life with an individual, and I just could not get through to this person through words. And so I made that decision. I said, the holistic science teaches us, I am going to put it into place in practice. And I, for a long, long time, would just think about that person internally, pray to that inner soul. And one day, really, this person came around. That person wasn't speaking to me for so long. And she came around and she talked to me again. And we have a very, very nice relationship right now because of it. So the world will not leave you until you render all of your dues. So really kind of having that firm resolution that you want to resolve clashes is essential. Challenge and neutralize any internal opinions so that the negativity will not affect the mind, speech, and body. That's very essential. And the speech is a tape record of previous births. So keeping that in mind allows you to not be affected by speech, right? If speech is essentially a tape record, can you change it? And if the answer to that is no, then why are we being affected by it, right? Cycle of clashes. So old accounts get squared away in this life, and new accounts are going to be open and carried forward for next birth. So really keeping that in mind and wanting to resolve your conflicts now will be very essential to not keep anything pending for the future. So for avoid clashes, really understanding that the world is nothing but vengeance. If you do this, I do this. Whenever egos get involved, it's always going to be it's always going to cause differences of opinions. It's always going to cause one to want something and one to take something, one to give something. It's not going to be balanced when egos are involved. And so being trapped in that world wide web, the only way to really free yourself is kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, my goal is to avoid clashes. How do I do so? One thing that's important to acknowledge, and Dadaji has said this, is enduring versus resolving. So a lot of times one thinks that, I'm just going to endure this. I am a strong person. I can take this. Again, you're still kind of being fostered by that ego when you say that, right? And so in that state of ignorance, when you're trying to endure, you're suppressing that suffering, and that causes a rebound in nature. And so the right understanding is not that you're enduring something. The right understanding is actually that the sufferer is at fault. So if I'm suffering, there's some previous mistake of mine that needs to be resolved in order for me to be free of this karma. So Gnan, or the alertness of that pure self, is really what's going to eliminate that suffering. And so we have a term called samadhi, which is equipoise or alertness of pure self. That's really kind of what we're aiming for when we say we want to avoid clashes. That level of resolution is important, rather than just trying to say, I'm just going to take it, I'm going to endure this. It's more so, hey, I'm not going to endure this. This is happening because of my own fault or my own mistake. So admitting your mistakes openly and apologizing is crucial. Letting others be right and teach and lead, that's going to essentially free you, and that's going to make it so that you can allow the other person to felt heard and resolve their negative feeling towards you. When the spouse is upset, you want to make sure you're complimenting that. So any positive, negative charge, you need to be that neutral energy, be calm and mild-tempered back. So causes are just new dealings, and they can't be sensed, and effects are what is sensed, and full settlement of past accounts. So when you think about this from an internal perspective, anything internally that you are seeing or hearing, like your opinions, thoughts that form in your head, those are what can potentially develop into a cause. When you side with those, when you say I'm right inside, or when you say that this person is good or this person is bad, those are what are sowing those seeds for next life. Whereas anything that you're sensing now, your feelings, being hurt, being sad, all of those are effects due to past lives. So the path towards liberation, one of the most beautiful aphorisms is really adjust everywhere. So having that art of adjustment, non-partiality, is really important if that's your essential goal. So you want to be samkhya, which is settling everything with equanimity through knowledge of real self. Understanding that there's a pure self within and within all others, that'll really allows you to settle your accounts with grace and with fairness. So the outcome of correct understanding is Gnan. Gnan is essentially whenever you're learning something to correct whatever mistakes of the past is there. Worldly life is kind of a museum of conflicts, varying degrees, varying frequencies and intensities. So really having a fascination or attachment, that is going to actually breed infatuation. It's going to make one forget those wounds and those scars of worldly life. So keeping that in mind, one with any lessons that are learned through experience. Whenever you experience hurt from blows of the world, those types of things are really going to cause you to be detached from those worldly temptations and those worldly matters and come back into that pure soul self. And so a lot of times holistic scientists would say, give me a world of misery, give me negativity, give me all that in my external worldly life. And, as a child, when I would hear that being said, I would question it. I would say, why would anybody ask for negative circumstances to come their way? But this line here is exactly why. It's, in those negative circumstances, you kind of have more of a strong sense of want to be back in your pure soul self, to not agree with this ego. It's those negative times that you really come back to the real self. And that is why, holistic scientists ask for that in their life. So yes is the way to liberation. No is the way to samsara. Nothing that is not devastate. So nothing that is not supposed to happen will happen. And really observing that puppet show of previously sown seeds with the alertness of the real self is going to dissolve this. So if you want to prevent any quarrels, you just have to stay calm, composed, settle the matter, and have that right intention. And it may take time. Finally, just some common themes overall. Be a guest of nature in your own home. In the custody of the world, consider it as you're under arrest. And this is due to your past crimes or your misdeeds. And so if you're under arrest, what type of inner resolve you want to have to free yourself of whatever you've done in the past. You don't want to turn your disagreements into a loudspeaker system. That's not healthy or happy for anyone in the family. You don't want to meddle into others' affairs or exert dominance or control. You want to have really an adjustment attitude towards everyone and everything. Keep stitching any tears that you have in relationships. Just like we mentioned, the sufferer is at fault. Another way of hearing this is the burden is on the bearer. You want to discharge any of your moral obligations to fulfill your dharma or your responsibility within the role of wife, within the role of husband, within the role of a parent. And you also want to remain very humble, having that level of humility, understanding that things are without your control, beyond your control, and really being in a state of lagutam, or having that knowledge of pure source self, being your true self, is very important. And then really normality in all aspects of life, whether it be sleep, food, conversation, activity, that's very essential to keeping kind of a positive home life. And then biggest thing is we're not here to improve others, but we're here for self-suggestion or purushat. That's that real effort internally from within the heart. And that concludes my talk today. The references for this talk come from two very, very amazing books that have been compiled from speeches of Dada Bhagwan. So I highly recommend you read them. Home, A Heaven on Earth, as well as Home Sweet Home. Jai Sachidanand, everyone.
Jai Sachidanand, my goodness, my God. Truly holistic and all-covering. You have given us plenty of pearls. What a research-based and years of thinking are involved in this amazing presentation. I would like to invite our participants to open up and either add something to this presentation, or what you like most from this you can share. May I invite Madam Dr. Iti Dayal from Haridwar. Dr. Iti Dayal, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Please. Holistic parenting.
Am I audible?
Yeah, please, clearly.
Yes.
Okay. Namaste, sir, and namaste, ma'am. Jai Sachidanand. It is because of the blessings of Sachidanand that every week we are attaining new gems of wisdom every week. And today's session was really very interesting and full of wisdom. We learned a lot. And I'll have to go through this session again and again. In the YouTube, I'll go through the session. It was really very informative, and thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And one thing that was really very appealing, that when the external actions fail, then we must do our subtle efforts, the strength of praying. And second thing that I learned today was that the responsibility of being a parent is more than being a prime minister or president, really. And yes, the institution of marriage, because now the marriages are breaking within a month, within 6 months. In a very short duration, these marriages are being broken. So here one must have to understand this, that when we are entering into this institution of marriage, so we think about what attires we will wear, how much money we will spend in making videos, in decorating the halls and other things to show off. But we must understand this, that before entering into the institution of marriage, we must learn about that what outcomes we need from this marriage, why we are doing this marriage, and if we want this kind of outcome from marriage, then what should be the attitude? And ma'am has beautifully explained this. Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm really very grateful to you that you explained in such a way, and every youth who is entering into the institution of marriage, every youth must go through this this knowledge, this wisdom, that before entering into the institution of marriage, they must understand these things. And the problem is that we are not even able to live harmoniously with our parents who have dedicated their lives for us. We are not able to live harmoniously with our siblings. And now are we really prepared to enter into a marriage, to live with a person who is coming from a different educational background, from a different culture, from a different mindset? Are we mature? Are we ready for this? We must understand this, the depth of marriage. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really very interesting session today.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you so
Dayal.
much. Thank you.
Well, let me call. Shaila Mulji ma'am is also with us. Shaila ma'am, please appear before us.
Jai Satchidanand, everybody.
Jai
I'm
Satchidanand.
actually driving, so I don't want to be a
Oh,
hazard
okay.
on the
Okay.
road.
No, please. Yeah.
But I didn't
All right.
want to miss any of Avani's wonderful presentations, so I took it with me on the road.
Please focus on driving. Thank you. Dr. Nimesh, what would you like to speak?
Jai Satchidanand. There's not much left to say. I think Avani was absolutely the perfect person to give this presentation, and this is probably 10 presentations in one. I have to say, it's just so much useful information for all of us, and we're all just really very grateful. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sejal Nathu ma'am is also with us. Sejal ji.
Jai Satchidanand.
Jai Satchidanand.
I've learned quite a bit. I think everybody really captured the essence and the true foundation of like each part of like the process of these relationships. And I was taking a lot of good notes. Thank you so much. And how everybody else said, I think we're very astounded of how much we still have yet to imbibe all of this into us. But you've really did a great job in putting this together in a way that it's extremely digestible and easy for us to understand. And we both really truly enjoyed it. So thank you.
That's wonderful.
Very nice
Thank
to
you.
see your daughter as well.
Thank you. Suresh and Meena Desai. Sir, you joined, I think, most earlier. All right. We have Avaniji also with us. Rani Krishnan ma'am.
Avani, as a person with no husband and no children, I still learned so much from the presentation. So I didn't want to miss it because I said, I know, you are such a great mom to your kids, what you teach them with all the holistic science. And as a daughter, I feel like it made me so grateful for my parents, and what's the gift that they gave us of this holistic science. So I think as parents also giving that to their children, as a beneficiary of that knowledge, I can never repay them for that, the greatest gift. And so I see that you are also doing that in the next generation as well as Sejal. So I just want to wish all of you happy Mother's Day tomorrow.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for an amazing presentation. And I can't wait for this to be recorded so I can share it with all the parents and spouses out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Raniji. Well, one point which caught my attention, and I should say, in marriage, not mine or yours, just ours. My God. Because when my child does something good, my wife says, see, my son has done this wonderful thing. And when there is any complaint, she just proclaim, say what your son is doing. So, really, and there are so many things. Huh? Thank you very much, ma'am. And let me invite now our Lalabhai Patel, sir, for the concluding remarks. Lala, sir, over to you. Please unmute and share.
So thank you, Avani. You have done a lot of efforts, lot of reading and digested. You have put a great digest of so many days work, I think, certainly. And thanks a lot of appreciation. And you are the right speaker for this as you chose the topic. So nice. We are very happy. And this session will be uploading on our website for the future. So everybody can refer to it. No doubt today the viewers were, number of viewers were less, but people watch it through YouTube. Huh? Thank you. Thanks a lot. Only one thing I would like to add that say if you have read this Secrets of Holistic Living book, there is one great observation has been made in couples that they have complementary attributes.
Yes.
Okay. One, say I am lacking in one area, my wife will be strong in that area. And that is how the nature brings both of them together so that a very good and efficient the home is run. That is seen everywhere. It has been observed and it's a great thing. Just by ignoring this nature's boon, right? People try in vain for about this research says about 12 to 14 years they try in vain to correct one another. Actually, so and if we understand this from the very beginning, it saves a lot of time and energy. So once again, so nice and thank you. This was your first session in HSRC team. You are representing us there also. So please find some time for other sessions also in other programs. Great. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, all the listeners. Thank you, Suresh Bhai. Thank you.
Thank you, Lala sir. Thank you very much, Avani ma'am, for your precious time you donated today. And I'm also thankful to technology because this session will serve the entire humanity. On this topic, I don't think any very good video is available. So right now, we have this precious presentation for all the coming generations of parents as well as husbands and wives. Thank you very much once again. And do attend our upcoming session that will be on holistic food to be taken by Chris Mueller from Germany. So once again, I wish you goodbye. Do take good care of yourself. Dada Bhagwan blesses all. Thank you very much. Avaniji, thanks a lot. Hats off to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let us meet again in the next presentation. Jai Sachidanand. Very humbly.